Hello, friends, neighbors. John, your neighbor here. Welcome to the Nook. It's Saturday. We're going to shoot some rye. And actually, the rye I have at the table is, I think, affordable, available, and isn't one of those unique, ration allocated bottles that you can't find. Except, I couldn't find this Wild Turkey 101 until I just noticed it last week in my market. So, this has finally come into my market. So why don't you pour a little bit of Wild Turkey 101 rye if you have it, or Elijah Craig Rye if you have it, and if not, really any American rye, but I suggest it's a rye that would be called barely legal. So not an MGP 95.5, but rather a rye that's just in there over that 51%. So pour something and come on back. 3, 4. And thanks for coming back. As I said in the opener, we're going to talk this Wild Turkey 101 rye, and I know it is a staple or an average or a regular rye in most markets, but it just wasn't around here. And so I'd see people talk about it, and of course I like Wild Turkey 101 bourbon, and yet I couldn't get their rye, and it always made me a little bit feeling like I was left out. So now I have it. Now I don't really have good insight into this. Websites tend to say it's 51% rye, and then is this one 37% corn and balance in barley. It is 50.5% or 101 proof. And I also don't know the age of this, but I like the bottle redesign Wild Turkey's taken on, and it looks nice. And certainly in my market, like it's sitting at Wine and Beyond for 38 bucks Canadian for a 50.5% rye. That's a pretty good deal. And then, we'll talk about Elijah Craig. So aside from, those basic kind of broad strokes, what's in here, let's just talk about the rye, nose and taste, and what I get off this. Honestly, affordable, now it's available, rye. Let's give her a go. I find quite a bit of sweetness, like light sweet caramels, a little bit of vanilla coming up, and then a little bit of maybe mint, but some of the rye notes, but not grassy rye, just a little bit of something. Yeah, okay, there, and maybe just a hint of black licorice, which I do get in a number of ryes. So there's a little bit of savory note, a little bit of mint or something on the back end, but actually on the nose, it's fairly sweet. Let's try it on the palate. Cheers. It's much better on the palate. In fact, the palate is really aligned to what I like to find in a rye. It is spicy, peppery, definitely a little more of that of light eucalyptus mint come in. So we got that kind of freshening of rye and spice. So nice spice, good hug, and there is sweetness still. There are still sugared sweetness coming through here. Sugared candies, sugared apples, sugared. Yeah, very, very sweet. Let's give it another try. Cheers. It is the juxtaposition of those, sugared apples and candy, and then into those, minted black pepper, spicing. Now on the finish, hot cinnamons, a little bit of oak. Could use a bit more oak. I know they do number 4 number 4 charred barrels, alligator char. I think that's the only barrels Wild Turkey uses. So there is that char oak, but I was expecting a bit more. Now it's drying as ryes do. That to me it kind of cleans out the palate and begins to, I think, create the sense of, well, you better take another sip. Your mouth's dry. So this rye is, for my palate, for what I go to in a not complicated rye, it's really, really well. It's a little too sweet, but there's something about that sweet pepper, bit of fruit that makes it really drinkable, really crushable. So certainly I would say this is not a complicated, not a layered. It certainly doesn't have a ton of grass or a ton of rye grain. It's very present, but it's muted into a rye bread that's almost a banana bread. Like, it's that kind of, it's not not just that dry bread, but now we've got some buttered bread in there and whatnot. It's got a lot of other things going on. Maybe it's that fair amount of corn. Maybe it's just that like low rye. But it does, boy, it's really drinkable. Normally sweet whiskey puts me off, I will say that, but because of the significant, hug and spice, char on the end and whatnot, it balances it, which makes it more drinkable. Anyways, is it still burny and hot? Yeah, it's an Ananas product. It's not super refined. But if in your market it's that kind of 38 bucks Canadian and you like rye in any way, bring home a bottle. Give it a try. This, clearly, if it's on the shelf regularly now in my market, I'm quite sure will be on my shelf regularly here at home because there's no guilt in making a good old fashioned with it or those kinds of things because of the price, and yet I think it holds up neat. This to me is an easy 3 3/4 rye, which is really great for that price point. Well, I might have talked a little too positively about Wild Turkey, but it's solid for where it comes in. Let's see now in a direct comparison how Elijah Craig small batch rye comes in. Now it's slightly less proof at 94, so we're 47%. And I believe it's very, very similar mash bill. I think we're at that 51% rye, maybe a little less corn, but we're really, really similar mash bill. Also a non-age stated product. And also one that kind of came into my market, although I believe in most markets it's, available average rye. I think these are definitely competitors and they're not meant to be unique allocated bottles. It just happens that some markets have them and some don't. In mine, this is more expensive than the Wild Turkey, but not so much that I would think of it as in a different bracket. So Elijah Craig Rye, nose and taste. So in this direct comparison, I've got a little more souring, a little more almost lemon. This actually leaning into cinnamons in a direct comparison, which I did get on the end, not on the nose, but in comparison, now I'm really getting that. Yeah, cinnamon apple. And here I've got a little sour cherry. Also some of the rye, but actually less rye mint, I would say, than I would get on the 101. Let's try it on the palate. Cheers. So the sour cherry went away and just became a cherry. So I've got some cherry fruits in here, and it's also perky and spicy and peppery. It is almost a little more. Well, I don't know. I was gonna say caramel, but there's something else that's playing in it that. Okay, but now I'm in the finish. I better take another sip and try to get at that sip before I get into the finish. Yeah, I'm gonna take back what I said about caramel. I've got some high sweetness, some vanillas, but definitely some peppers, some black peppers. What makes it different? I was gonna say is that it's yellow. That's a wild tasting note. I don't mean that. This leaned into. I know I said it didn't get charred, but it really actually ended up leaning into a darker apple, a more cinnamon spice. This is leaning into a vanilla, cherry, sweeter oak for sure. Like not a toasted oak, but like we're getting into a very sweet almond nut oak, versus this has, I know I talked so much about the sweetness, but it really balances it with a darker palate with some scratchier char oak, cinnamon now, like red hot cinnamon. They both have pepper. They both have spice. They both have a little caramel butter sweetness to them. They actually have a significant number of similarities. I enjoy this as well. In a direct head-to-head, I'm still leaning with the way 101 put it together. This has a little bit almost Canadian regular rye type sweet vanilla almond reused cask going on, which of course it isn't because it's American, so it's all good new oak, none of that reused cask stuff. But I'd say this sits at about 3.5 for me, and this is 3 3/4 plus in terms of that. I really like it. So that's just a quick break. I have to go back to painting, which is probably the thing of domestic chores I hate the most. But there are rooms that need painting, so painting we will do. Thank you for taking a moment to taste these ryes with me. If you have any thoughts on Wild Turkey or Elijah Craig, or really any of those ryes that sit on that, just over 51%. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for dropping in.